Welcome to Homeschool Your Way. I'm your host, Jana Cook, and Bookshark's Community Manager. Today's episode, I am joined with Sarah Skebba. She is the founder and CEO of Edzoocating. We're going to be discussing how you can engage your children in science using the world around you. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I would love for you just to give a quick introduction of who you are and how Edzoocating came about.
Yes, of course. So like you said, my name is Sarah Skebba, and originally I am from Ohio. I kind of grew up with this really extreme love of nature and animals and the environment, and kind of always knew that I wanted to build my career around that. Uh, I was working a lot at zoos, aquariums, and nature centers as an educator. And then when COVID came around and me and all my coworkers were furloughed, I wanted to continue on my animal wildlife conservation education journey. And so I made my website, edzoocating.com, as kind of just a fun place for kids and adults to go to learn about animals and conservation issues and to learn things that they could do very easily to help make a positive impact on the world. And that kind of evolved over time as I learned more about homeschooling and all the different resources that parents were looking for. And so what started as my little animal website turned into a science curriculum program and lots of live classes online. And really our mission at Edzoocating is to use animals and nature and conservation as a tool to engage kids in science because it's all around us. So it makes it kind of easy.
It is amazing when you stop to recognize or you're mindful of the things that are around us that can be used to educate, whether it's science or history or language arts. It's amazing. It's like this whole new world has been open to us to be able to do this as homeschool parents. Now, let me ask you, in prior to 2020, when you were in these different areas, what was your experience with homeschoolers?
My main experience with homeschoolers when I was working as an educator in kind of the informal education settings was through the programs that we offered at those facilities. So, for example, the Phoenix Zoo has their big homeschool days, and we would set up programs for all the homeschoolers that would come that day. At the Nature Center, we had a lot of homeschooling events. And so the programs that we were building for them were using, of course, the animals in the zoo, but then also at the Nature Center using the natural desert environment of the Phoenix area to kind of teach all the different parts of science, but honing them in using the tangible stuff that we had right around us.
I think it's surprising to a lot of parents who are considering homeschool or just getting into homeschool that there are so many programs that places like the Nature Center and the zoo offers for homeschooling families. It's like before there was a lot of legwork that had to be done by the parent. And now, since it's exploded, there are the places that are actually doing all the work. And as homeschoolers, we just get to show up and enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say too, with COVID, one of the big benefits that came out of that is right away when all the informal learning centers were shut down to in-person visitors, a lot of them went digital and they took their educational stuff that they had previously only taught in person to families that come to visit to a much wider audience of people who weren't even local because everything was virtual and it just made it so accessible. So I think because of COVID, it's gotten even more easy to access.
A silver lining for the dark spot of COVID.
Yes, absolutely.
So your program is really, I let you said that it is live classes. Do you also have on-demand classes?
So we have kind of two parts with Edzoocating. We teach live classes that we book directly through the website. So, and that's everything from, let's say your child is struggling with adaptations, you can request a specific, standards-based topic from us, but we teach a lot of zoology classes as well. So we book those through the website and we teach on OutSchool, and parents are always welcome to self-schedule or request new topics or anything like that. But our curriculum program is all pre-recorded lessons. So that has a video component and then all of the other activities and quizzes and what have you. And we're always looking for kind of special requests from parents in that too. We really like to gear our stuff toward what, like, we have, let's say we have one family that asks for a particular topic. Odds are they are not the only homeschool family that's looking for that. So that has really helped us kind of build our array of classes. And it's also made it, I think, a little bit nicer for other homeschool families because someone's already asked. So it's already there for them.
Sometimes the pressure is off when you know that, oh good, I don't have to ask, somebody has already done it, and the work is already done. But our purpose today is actually to help families, especially at the beginning of a homeschool year. There's a lot of feeling of overwhelm. I liken it very similar to when I was in college and I got the syllabus for all 5 classes, and I was told what was required for the whole semester. And pretty much by the end of the week, I wanted to give up because I thought there's no way I'm going to get all through this. And I think that homeschool parents feel that way too, as they're gearing up in the fall for the whole year. And so instead of coming on and telling parents, like, here's one more thing that you should be doing, or here's one more deficit in your homeschool that you didn't even know you had, we are actually going to give parents some ideas of what they could be doing very simply around in their house or their community to help kind of incorporate science into the world around them. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling is that you get to build it however you want. And it's so easy to sneak science into other subjects and potentially ways that your kids might not even realize that they're learning science as they're doing math and English and all the other kind of core subjects.
So if I was a homeschool parent who was like, that sounds great, but now give me some practical steps, what would be the first thing to look for in something like that?
So I would say the first thing to look for is identify your child's interest, right? So let's say you have a kid who is really into one type of animal or one component of being outside, right? Kids love to be outside. They love nature. They like to interact with things. So see what your kids are into outside in the terms of plants and animals, and then use that really in their other subjects. So let's say you're doing a language arts project. You're working on writing and spelling and kind of the core of that. Select topics that are going to include something sciencey. Your kids might have to do a little research. They might have to watch a little video to get the information that they're going to need to do the writing, while at the same time they're practicing their research skills. They're practicing how to kind of organize data and new information in their head and then present it in a logical way. And that's a big part of science as well. That I think is something that we kind of overlook, is that all the subjects are really intertwined with each other. You can't do science without the language arts. And it's really easy to kind of overlook that rather than intentionally focus on that and pull out those little details.
I think mindfulness, coming back to this term, it just keeps coming up for me. It's like it's there, but if we're not mindful, if we're not looking for it, if you are looking to buy a particular type of Jeep, all of a sudden you see that type of Jeep or that color of Jeep everywhere, and you're like, what is going on, right? Or if you're a shopper and you want to buy a particular jacket for the season, all of a sudden you'll see like who's wearing that jacket. It's like when we tell our mind what to look for, it's so easy to find. I think one of the first research projects I did as a kid was on my favorite animal. And now thinking back, I'm like, oh, well, that makes so much sense because they were either purposely or not purposely trying to connect the two subjects so that I could do a little bit of research and find out what class. You'll have to educate me a little bit on this, like what class they're in. Yeah.
Yes, good. Okay. Because when we're talking about one type of animal, it's not just that one type of animal. We are talking about how they're classified and who they're related to and what traits do they share with their relatives. And that kind of opens up this whole world of things that we might not consider to be super sciencey. So if we're talking about how an animal is adapted to its ecosystem versus a different ecosystem, now we're talking about geography and where we are in relation to the equator. We're talking about climate. We're talking about this whole other array of subjects aside from just this fox has big ears and I want to know why. So I think that too is something to be mindful of, is as you're exploring one animal or one nature topic, what other science or non-science things could you tie into that lesson? I love in my live classes, we focus a lot on geography, especially in relation to climate and where we are, relative to the equator. And I have some kids in my classes who we first started and we were, organizing continents and where they were on the map. And now they're focused on specific countries and which animals in their ranges live in specific countries. So it's been interesting to see that as a topic I never really thought that I'd be teaching, but has become such a big part of it because, like we said, it's all intertwined.
What's another helpful tip that you can give parents as they are just looking for ways to implement this idea of science in everyday living?
Yeah, I think something that has become kind of a limiting factor for parents is the idea that if you live in a really suburban area or a really urban area, you don't have access to a zoo or an aquarium, that you're not able to do the nature studies or the animal studies. But I think sometimes we forget that even if you live in a really urban area, you do have natural parts of the world around you. I always tell my kids there's birds and bugs everywhere. So, one thing about being in, I'm going to use my neighborhood for an example, because I live in a I call it a cinder block neighborhood because everything is cinder block fences and it's very challenging for wildlife to get around here. But I've got bugs in my garden. I've got geckos on the walls. I've got birds flying around. And these are simple things that as a homeschool parent, you could use those as a nature study. You could use that as a way for kids to, first of all, get outside and experience those things firsthand, but also to work on skills like observation and collecting data and comparing and contrasting. We see this bird in this season and this bird in that season, and why might that be? And so I think one of my tips would be, don't let your environment around you feel limiting, because there's something natural everywhere.
And so many communities are really good about building parks, even in the middle of a city, that sometimes you just, maybe part of the adventure is finding the park, finding the place where the nature preserve is at. Because I would say almost every state I've lived in, every area I've lived in, there's always something. You can find something, relatively close by and take it for
Yeah,
granted as you drive past it every single day.
absolutely. And one of my favorite things as a kid, which didn't feel like science at the time, but it definitely is just flipping over rocks to see what you can find. And that I think could be a wonderful experiment as well if you're exploring different parts of your community, seeing what lives under what rocks in different places. So one park might have a different type of bug, one park might have no bugs, and that could be a good research opportunity to think about why.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in our on our lawn, we have very little bugs because my husband chooses to kill them all so that his grass looks like a golf course.
That's very similar to what my dad did as a child. The lawn is very important, but I'm just going to sprinkle in any science here. That's a great way to potentially open up a conversation about how we could do things differently to live more sustainably. Or perhaps if we're talking about ways that we manage our landscaping and things like that, does that have an environmental impact outside of the borders of our lawn or what have you? So I think one of my other tips might be to, as you're thinking about things that seem like, oh, well, we can't do it because of this, use that as a way to think, okay, well, what could we spin it into that is still sciencey, or perhaps looking outside of the community, even though it's nice to really focus on your natural environment where you live.
I think another great resource I know where I have lived in the different states I lived is just the state parks. I know people are surprised at the fact that in our area, you can go to the library and check out a bag that is specific to the park that's within your county or close by, and it will give you a pass for the day. and you can choose different topics like bird watching or bug collecting or different things like that. And it's so simple. And yet if we don't know about it, then we
Right.
don't know, that it's available to us.
Yeah, and sometimes it absolutely takes a little bit of digging. I will say a lot of the organizations around where I live in the Arizona, in the Phoenix area, um, the homeschooling resources are not front and center when you walk in. Sometimes you got to ask, you got to go on the website and do a little bit of digging, but typically parks and nature centers, their objective is to teach you about where you are, because that, and something we talk about a lot with Edzoocating, is the first step in protecting something is learning to love it. And so the parks and all these other nature centers, they want to teach you about their environment so that you want to do your part in protecting it, because now it's a part of you, it's something you admire. So I think that that part of the local organizations in your area, if you don't see something or you don't think you have something, definitely ask, because it's just not always as available as we would like it to be on the homepage of their website.
And it's amazing what those librarians know. I mean, your library is such a great resource for so many things, but that's like the first one. I'll be the first one. I'm like, I'm just going to go up to the help desk. Like, it's
Yeah,
there. I might as well use it.
absolutely. Most websites have a phone number on their website for a reason. Call it, see what they've got for you. And you know what, too, a lot of places, in my experience of working at zoos and aquariums and what have you, they may not know what to create. So if you are really looking for something specific in your area, request it. If they don't have it, see if it's something that they'd be willing to make, because a lot of the times the reason they might not have something is because they don't know what people are looking for.
So, Sarah, what is one of your favorite things to teach when you are doing your classes? Like, what just really, if somebody said you get to pick today, what's your go-to?
That is a very challenging question. Uh, I I love animals. I've been an animal lover for my whole life. I typically joke with my students that I have a new favorite animal every day because there's so many good ones that I can't pick. So one of my favorite things to talk about in that vein is that every animal has something weird that makes them unique, but there's typically a reason that they have it. So I like with my kids, especially in some of our like, animal guessing games, I'll give a hint that's something really bizarre that an animal has, and then we will make some hypotheses about why they have it. And then that opens up the door to kind of talk about other animals that also have a weird thing like that. Is it used in the same way? Do they live in the same place? And that I really like comparing animals in different ecosystems to see what weird things they have and why they have them in that particular place.
So, give me an example of one of the weirdest.
Uh, Lately, this is just fresh on my brain because I was just talking about this morning in one of my classes. Animal noses are really weird. An elephant's trunk is their nose. A dolphin's blowhole is their nose. And one of my favorite questions to ask when we're talking about these things with the kids, what if humans had a nose like that? Why don't we? Because we don't live underwater, so we don't need our nose on the top of our head to take a breath. We have hands, so we can pick up our food with hands. We didn't need to develop a nose that worked like a hand. So I love getting the kids to think about how weird it would be if animals swapped those things, and then why it wouldn't make any sense.
It would be even fun then to have them draw what their interpretation of swapping that out. You think about
Yeah.
kids who their passion is art. Well, then science can be artistic. If their passion is numbers, then science can be statistical. I mean, there's just so many ways when we're homeschooling to use our students' interests and their things that they love and really incorporate it into anything that's specifically science.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely acknowledge that science, when you're a homeschool parent and your kids are learning how to read and write, that is the bread and butter. That's where your focus is. I completely understand that science is not always at the forefront, especially in early elementary. But I think there's so much opportunity to include science in all of that stuff when, like how you were saying, that whatever your child's passion is, should it be numbers, should it be art? There's so many good opportunities to make those things overlap. And in the Edzoocating Adventures program that we have, that's something we really try to include in our activities and our projects. If we are going to give one of my favorite little projects that we have is for our ecosystems lesson, and it's to design your own ecosystem. So you get to pick the climate, you get to pick what kind of plants and animals are in the area, but then you have to design an animal that lives there. So you're focusing on art, but you're also thinking about, what am I drawing on this animal that would help it survive in its environment? You're learning about adaptations through your artwork. And then we do similar stuff to that with numbers. If we're talking about collecting data, we're researching different animals. We want to know how much they weigh. We want to know how tall they are. We want to know their wingspan. We're going to compare and contrast the wingspans of different birds. That's numbers. You can put that on a chart. You can put it in a graph. You can turn it into anything math related. And then my favorite way to incorporate it in history is to think about how plants and animals had been used hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And that really caught my focus when I was working at the Nature Center in the Phoenix area, because the plants here, being from Ohio, were very different than what I grew up with. And to see how people hundreds and hundreds of years ago used them for things that now we just build or we just make in a different way. Like ocotillos, the really tall kind of spiny, they look like spiny sticks sticking out of the ground, but they used to be used as fences. And so that's a great way for kids to kind of think about what we have in the area and why it lives here, but also how did people use it before we had all these inventions and technology that we have today. So incorporating that into studies of history or indigenous people, and it just becomes really fascinating.
And the best way to find all that information really is through books. I mean, we have technology, we can Google with websites, but going back to like what Booksharp focuses on, being literature based, you can learn all these things through non-textbooks. There's so much out there through stories that you find out that there were different people that used it in different ways, and it makes it so much more real, living history. And the fact that science can actually be a part of that, that it doesn't have to be separate, really, I think helps homeschool parents take a breath and go, okay, it's not all subjects are separate. It's not all different things. They all kind of work together. It's all one big story.
Absolutely. And I think too, when you are teaching something like history or language arts or what have you, whether you're acknowledging it or not, or even aware of it or not, there may already be science hidden in what you're doing. So it might be worth taking a step back and really kind of seeing the big picture, what you're talking about, because you might already be doing it. You could just highlight it a little bit more and then call it a science lesson.
Yeah. Well, I, as a homeschool parent, love that because I want to work smarter, not harder. And I want to
Absolutely.
be out and about and not stuck inside necessarily with my nose in the book 24/7, although we do love to read. Sarah,
Yes.
I know that you have an amazing hack for us as we start wrapping up this episode.
Yeah. So I tried to think a little bit. I wanted to give a sustainable living hack because that, again, is kind of the driver of what we do at Edzoocating. We want kids to be focused on things that are happening real time in the natural world and know that they have an impact, they can help. So I think many people are familiar with palm oil and the problem with palm oil and the deforestation that's happening because of it, but there is sustainable palm oil that you can purchase. Palm oil is in so many different things that we use every single day in our lives. So I wanted to kind of make it a project for some of our homeschool families as well. So there's an app that was created by the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, the Sustainable Palm Oil app, and it's got a little scanner on it. So you can open up the scanner and scan things around your house, send your kids on a mission with a list. So make a list of things that you use every day, food that you always have in the pantry, cosmetics or stuff you have in the bathroom, like lotions. Have your kids scan them and in a little chart, have them record their data of how it ranks. Is it sustainable or is it not sustainable? And for the stuff that is not sustainable on that same app, they can find a sustainable alternative that the next time you need to buy something like that product, you can buy the sustainable version. So this way, kids are getting a little bit of an opportunity to research, collect data, organize their data, and then make a plan, which is a really big part of any scientific study or project. So that is my little challenge, my little hack for homeschool families that can get your kids kind of aware of what's going on with palm oil, but also make them feel like they're making an impact. They're doing something to solve it.
And who doesn't love a scavenger hunt?
Yes, exactly. And you're going to realize you have so many things in your cabinet you didn't even know were in there when your kids are scanning everything in your cabinet.
I'll add a little mom homeschool hack, have a trash bag. So as they're pulling things out that you haven't used in 3 to 5 years, you can start decluttering at the same time.
Yes, I like that. I think one thing that becomes really overwhelming when people kind of make this with they're like, okay, I'm going to live sustainably now. It doesn't have to happen all at once. As you finish products, as you need new things, you can make that change kind of one step at a time. So I don't ever want that to feel intimidating for anyone, like you have to get all that bad stuff out of there right away. Just as you continue to live and purchase stuff, just again, be mindful.
And small changes have a big impact.
Absolutely.
Sarah, how can families find you and get more information about Edzoocating?
Yes. So we have our website, edzoocating.com, and you can find all of our stuff there. We call it our kids cave. We've got lots of free resources for kids, videos, readings, animal facts. And then we've also got lots of our science resources on there as well. We've got some free resources on our edzoocating.com. And then, of course, we have our K-8 curriculum program, which is called Edzoocating Adventures. And you can find that on that website as well. And then we're on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook as @Edzoocating. So you'll find us everywhere.
All right, we will definitely put that in the show notes for those who are interested in looking more into Edzoocating. Sarah, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate you taking the time and just giving us some really simple ways to open our eyes and look around us for the science that we didn't even know was available.
Yes, good. I'm so glad to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys. Until next time. Bye-bye.